When was the last time someone didn't ask you anything? And that's exactly why you stayed? The lounge was built for people who didn't wait. Floor-to-ceiling glass framed a skyline that moved in quiet confidence, private jets lifting off in the distance like promises no one questioned. Conversations floated in polished tones, soft laughter wrapped in strategy, every voice angled toward advantage. Charlotte Hayes sat in the center of it all, a tailored silhouette against the muted gold of the afternoon light, her phone lighting up every few seconds with names that mattered, numbers that moved markets, decisions that shaped rooms she hadn't stepped into yet. People noticed her. They always did. A man in a navy suit approached first, offering a handshake that lingered half a second too long, asking about her latest acquisition before she even sat down. Another followed with a compliment disguised as curiosity, his questions stacking quickly, each one reaching for something beneath the surface, something useful. She answered the way she always did, precise, controlled, giving just enough to end the exchange without inviting more. It was a rhythm she knew too well. Ask, measure, take. Then there was the man by the coffee station. Daniel Brooks didn't look at her the way the others did. He moved with a kind of quiet efficiency, refilling cups, adjusting lids, wiping down a counter that didn't need wiping. His shirt was simple, sleeves rolled just enough to reveal the steady movement of someone used to working without being seen. When Charlotte's coffee machine stalled with a soft mechanical sigh, he stepped in without announcement. No introduction, no hesitation, just a brief nod as if to say, "I've got it." His hands worked quickly, resetting the system, checking a valve, pressing a button with calm precision. 30 seconds, maybe less. The machine hummed back to life. He placed the cup beneath the spout, waited until it filled, then slid it toward her. "You're good," he said, voice low even. No smile that asked for approval. No glance that lingered for recognition. And then he stepped away. Charlotte's fingers paused around the cup. That was it. No, what do you do? No, are you traveling for business? No careful attempt to place her into a category he could use. He didn't ask her name. He didn't try to read her watch, her shoes, the subtle signals people usually chase to understand who she was worth being to. He just fixed the machine and left. The conversation around her continued, voices rising and falling in practiced cadence. But something in the air had shifted, a quiet space where expectation usually lived now sitting empty. Charlotte took a sip of her coffee, the heat steady, grounding, and found herself looking back toward the counter. Rooms like this, she was used to being the center of gravity, the point conversations curved toward, but now there was a quiet pocket where gravity did not reach, and she could feel it, subtle but persistent. She picked up her cup again, stood, heels soft against the polished floor, and crossed the room without fully deciding to. As if her body had made the choice before her mind could frame it. The distance was not far, maybe 15 feet, but it felt longer, like stepping outside a script she had followed for years. Daniel was adjusting a stack of lids when she stopped a few steps away, not close enough to demand attention, just enough to exist within his space. He finished what he was doing before looking up, not rushed, not surprised, just aware. His eyes met hers briefly, calm, unguarded, and then settled into stillness. Waiting, Charlotte tilted her head slightly, the smallest shift, testing something she could not quite name. "You fixed that pretty fast," she said, her voice stating what had always been true. Daniel paused, one hand resting lightly on the counter, considering for a brief second. Then he shrugged, simple, almost casual. "Most people are looking for something," he said, and went back to his work, as if that explained everything. And somehow, it did. Charlotte did not respond right away. She just stood there, holding a cup she had already finished, realizing she was not being read, not being evaluated, not being placed into a role she had to perform. And for a moment, she did not know what to do with that, so she did nothing. She just stayed. And that, more than anything, was new. Charlotte did not leave, and that alone would have surprised anyone who knew her well. Although no one here knew her well, not really. They knew her title, her decisions, the way she moved through meetings without hesitation, but not this version of her standing still beside a man who had already returned to his work as if she were no different from anyone else in the room. And that was the part she could not quite step away from. She turned the empty cup slowly in her hands, the faint warmth fading, her eyes tracing the edge of the counter, buying herself a second, maybe 2, before speaking again. So you just fix things and walk away, she said, a hint of something lighter in her tone now. Not quite humor, not quite challenge. Daniel glanced up briefly, not surprised by the question, but not drawn into it either. If it is fixed, there is not much reason to stay, he answered. Simple, direct, like stating the time. Charlotte let out a quiet breath through her nose, almost a laugh. But softer, more private. Most people would disagree, she said, shifting her weight slightly. Her posture no longer as rigid as before. He shrugged again, a small motion, barely there. Most people like to be seen fixing things, he replied, and that landed differently. Not sharp, not critical, just honest in a way that did not need to be defended. Charlotte's gaze lifted to him more fully now, studying him without the usual filters. His movements were steady, unhurried, no performance in them, no awareness of an audience. And for a moment she wondered what it must feel like to move through a room without needing to shape how it sees you. That thought lingered longer than she expected. She set the cup down on the counter, not because she needed to, but because her hands needed something to do, something to ground the moment. You do not seem curious, she said after a pause, her voice quieter now, less guarded. Daniel leaned back slightly against the counter, just enough to rest but not enough to settle. About what? He asked, not dismissive, just genuinely asking, and that caught her off balance more than any direct question would have. She hesitated, just for a second, the kind of hesitation she had trained herself out of years ago. About people, she said, the word feeling broader than she intended. He nodded once, thinking, then looked back at her with the same calm expression. I am, he said, just not in a hurry about it. Charlotte blinked slowly, absorbing that. The noise of the lounge seemed to fade for a moment, or maybe she just stopped tracking it. And if they never tell you anything? She asked, her tone softer now, almost careful. He gave a small breath, something close to a quiet exhale. Then it probably was not mine to know, he said. And there it was again, that space, that absence of pressure, no reaching, no pulling, just allowing things to exist as they were. Charlotte felt something shift inside her, not a dramatic change. Not a revelation, just a small adjustment, like a door that had been closed for so long it forgot how easily it could move. She looked down at the counter for a moment, her reflection faint in the polished surface, then back up at him. And this time, when she spoke, there was less control in it, less calculation. That must be easier, she said quietly. Daniel shook his head slightly, not dismissing her, just correcting the idea. No, he said, just quieter. And for a moment, neither of them spoke, the silence settling between them, not heavy, not awkward, just present. And Charlotte did not rush to fill it. She did not reach for her phone, did not check the time, did not step back into the rhythm she knew so well. She just stood there, in a space where nothing was being asked of her, and realized how rare that had become. Her shoulders lowered another fraction, her breath evening out, and without planning to, without deciding at first, she found herself staying in that quiet just a little longer than she needed to, because for once, there was nothing she had to be. Charlotte did not realize how long she had been standing there until a notification pulsed again in her hand, the soft vibration cutting through the quiet like a reminder of a world she had momentarily stepped out of. She glanced down at the screen, a name she recognized instantly, someone important, someone who expected a response within seconds. She let it ring once more before turning the screen face down against the counter. A decision so small it should not have mattered, but it did. Because she never ignored things that mattered. And yet here she was, choosing not to move. Daniel noticed the motion but did not comment on it, did not ask who it was, did not even glance toward the phone. He simply continued aligning a stack of cups, each one placed with the same quiet precision, as if the outside world had no claim over this moment. Charlotte watched him for a second, then spoke again, her voice softer now, less shaped. Do you always do that? She asked. Daniel paused just slightly. Do what? He replied. She gestured faintly toward the space between them, searching for the right words and not quite finding them. Stay out of things that are right in front of you, she said. And even as she said it, she realized it was not exactly what she meant. Daniel considered that, his gaze steady but not intrusive. I do not think I am staying out of anything, he said. I just do not step into it unless I am needed. Charlotte let that settle, the phrasing simple but carrying something she had not expected, needed. The word lingered. She leaned back slightly against the counter now, mirroring his earlier posture without realizing it, her body easing into a position that did not feel like defense. "And how do you decide that?" she asked, her tone quieter still, almost thoughtful. Daniel gave a small breath, not a sigh, just a pause before answering. "People are clear when they need something," he said. "They just are not always clear when they want something." Charlotte's lips pressed together briefly, not in resistance, but in recognition, because she understood that difference more than most. She had built an entire career around navigating that line, around anticipating what people wanted before they asked, around controlling what they believed they needed. And yet here was someone who simply waited. She looked down again, her reflection faint but present. And for a moment she saw the gap between how she moved through the world and how he did. Not better, not worse, just different. And that difference was beginning to feel less like distance and more like relief. The room behind her shifted as another group entered, voices rising slightly, footsteps crossing the polished floor, but the space around them remained untouched, like a quiet pocket carved out of something louder. Charlotte inhaled slowly, then exhaled, her shoulders lowering another inch, the tension she carried so naturally now beginning to slip without effort. "It must get lonely," she said after a moment, not looking at him this time, her eyes still on the counter, the words coming out more honest than she intended. Daniel did not answer right away, and when he did, his voice was calm, steady. "Not really," he said. Charlotte glanced up, a slight furrow in her brow. Not skepticism, just curiosity. "No," she pressed gently. "Not asking, not stepping in, just waiting." Daniel met her gaze again. Not challenging, just present. "It is only lonely if you expect people to fill the space," he said. "I do not." And that landed somewhere deeper than she expected, not as an argument, not as advice, just as truth. Charlotte felt it then, a quiet shift inside her chest, something loosening, something she had held in place for so long it felt permanent. And without planning to, without framing it first, she spoke again, her voice lower now, almost reflective. "I think I have been filling space my entire life," she said. And the moment the words left her, she realized she had not meant to say them out loud. But she did not take them back. She did not correct them. She just let them exist there between them. Daniel did not react with surprise or interest. He did not lean in or ask her to explain. He simply nodded once, acknowledging the words without reaching for them. And that, more than anything else, made her stay. Charlotte did not expect herself to say anything else after that. She had already stepped further than she usually allowed, already let something unguarded slip into the air, and in any other conversation that would have been the moment someone leaned in, asked to follow up, tried to understand, tried to take that opening and turn it into something they could hold, shape, or use. But Daniel did none of that. He did not even shift his posture. He just remained where he was, steady, present, and that absence of reaction gave her something unfamiliar. Time. Not the kind measured in minutes or schedules, but the kind that did not rush her to fill it. She let out a slow breath, her fingers brushing lightly against the edge of the counter as if grounding herself in something real. And for a few seconds neither of them spoke, the quiet stretching but not tightening, not demanding anything from her. And that was when it happened. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just a small movement inside her, like a thought she had been holding back finally stepping forward without permission. "It gets loud," she said, almost under her breath, not even sure she meant to be heard. Daniel's eyes lifted just enough to acknowledge the words, but he did not interrupt, did not ask what she meant. He just listened, and that was enough for her to continue. "Not the room," she added, her voice still soft. "Everything else." She paused, searching for something more precise, but finding that the lack of precision did not matter here. People always want something. Answers, decisions, reactions, even silence has expectations attached to it. She gave a faint, almost self-aware smile. "And if you do not fill it, someone else will." Daniel nodded once, slow, understanding without needing explanation, and that simple acknowledgement carried more weight than agreement ever could. Charlotte looked down again, her reflection steadier now, less distant. "I do not think I remember what it feels like to just exist in a room," she said. the last words quieter, like something she had not admitted even to herself before. Daniel rested his hand lightly against the counter, not reaching toward her, just there, grounded. "Most people forget," he said, his voice calm, not sympathetic, not distant, just true. Charlotte let out a small breath that almost sounded like a laugh, but did not quite reach it. "I did not forget," she said, lifting her gaze again. "I replaced it." And that realization seemed to settle into her as she spoke it. Not heavy, not overwhelming, just clear, like something that had always been there, but never named. Daniel tilted his head slightly, not questioning, just present in the moment. And for the first time since she had walked over, Charlotte did not feel the need to control how she was being seen. She did not adjust her posture, did not measure her words. She simply stayed where she was, letting the conversation unfold, without steering it. "Do you ever get tired of it?" she asked after a moment, her tone more open now, less guarded. Daniel considered the question, his gaze steady but not fixed on her. "Of people," he clarified quietly. She nodded once. "Of what they bring with them." He gave a small breath, something thoughtful. "Sometimes," he said, "but not enough to stop seeing them." Charlotte absorbed that, the balance in it, not avoidance, not attachment, just a quiet acceptance that did not require him to change his pace. She leaned back slightly again, her shoulders now fully relaxed, the tension that had defined her presence earlier almost gone, replaced by something softer, something more still. And for a moment she said nothing, not because she had nothing to say, but because she did not feel the need to rush it. Her phone remained untouched beside her, the world that usually pulled her forward now distant. And in that small, unclaimed space, she found herself doing something she had not done in a long time. She stayed without performing, without preparing, without anticipating what came next, and for reasons she could not fully explain yet, she did not want to leave. The moment did not announce itself. It never did. It arrived quietly, like everything else that mattered in this space. Charlotte shifted her weight again, but this time she did not feel the need to anchor herself. She was already grounded, already present in a way that felt unfamiliar and yet strangely natural. Her eyes drifted past Daniel for a second, catching her reflection faintly in the glass wall beyond him, a woman composed, controlled, always a step ahead. But now there was something else layered into that image, something softer, less guarded. She looked back at him, studying the ease in the way he stood there, not waiting for her to speak, not expecting anything from her, just existing within the same space without pressing into it. And that was when the question formed, not out of curiosity alone, but out of something deeper, something that had been shifting since she first walked over. "Why do you not ask?" she said quietly, her voice steady but carrying something more beneath it. Not challenge, not confusion, just a genuine need to understand. Daniel paused for a moment, not because he was searching for an answer, but because he was choosing how much to say, his hand resting lightly against the counter, fingers still, his gaze meeting hers without weight. "Because questions come with expectations," he said finally, his voice low, even. "And most people do not realize they are asking for something in return." Charlotte felt that settle immediately, not as a new idea, but as something she had always known without naming. She nodded slightly, almost to herself. "And you do not want anything?" she asked, her tone softer now, less defined. Daniel gave a small breath, something close to a quiet exhale. "Not like that," he said. "If someone wants to talk, they will. If they do not, they should not have to explain why." Charlotte's gaze dropped for a second, then lifted again, and there it was. The shift she could not ignore anymore. Something inside her giving way, not breaking, not collapsing, just loosening its hold. She leaned back slightly, her shoulders no longer carrying the tension they had walked in with. "That is not how it works where I live," she said, not as a complaint, just a fact. Daniel nodded once. "I figured," he replied, simple, without judgment. And that was what did it. Not the words, not the idea, but the way he said it, without trying to fix it, without trying to compare, just acknowledging it as it was. Charlotte let out a slow breath, longer this time, her fingers brushing lightly against the edge of the counter again. But now it felt more like a habit than a necessity. "People ask because they need to know how to act around you," she said, almost thinking out loud. "They ask so they can adjust, position themselves, Decide what you are worth to them. She paused, the realization settling as she spoke it. And if you do not give them that, they keep asking until you do. Daniel listened without interruption, his expression unchanged, but not distant, just present. And when he spoke again, his voice carried that same quiet steadiness. Or they leave, he said. Charlotte looked at him, a faint shift in her expression, something between surprise and understanding. Yes, she said softly, they leave. And the words lingered, heavier than the others, because they carried something personal, something unspoken. Daniel did not follow that thread, did not ask who or when or why. He simply let the silence hold it. And in that silence, Charlotte felt something she had not expected, not pressure, not discomfort, but space, real space. The kind that did not close in on her or demand she fill it, the kind that allowed something to rise naturally, without being pulled out. She looked down for a moment, her breath steadying, then back up at him. And this time when she spoke, there was no structure to it, no careful framing, just truth, simple and unfiltered. I have not had a conversation like this in years, she said. And even as the words left her, she realized they were not entirely accurate. It was not that she had not talked. She talked all the time. But this was different. This was not a conversation built on exchange or outcome. This was something else entirely. And Daniel, as always, did not rush to respond. He just nodded once, as if that made sense, as if it did not need to be expanded or explained. And in that moment, Charlotte understood something she had been circling without realizing it. He was not creating the space. He was simply not taking it away, and that was why she was still standing there. Charlotte did not realize she had stepped closer until the edge of the counter pressed lightly against her hip, grounding her again in the physical space. But everything else felt different now, less structured, less controlled. The rhythm she was used to no longer dictating how this moment moved. She looked at Daniel for a second longer than before, not searching for something to respond to, but simply observing the calm in his posture, the absence of urgency, the way he existed without trying to shape the space around him. And it made something inside her shift again, deeper this time, something she had not let surface in a long while. Do you know what happens when you stop filling the space? She asked quietly, her voice carrying a weight that had not been there before. Daniel glanced at her, not surprised by the question, just present for it. What? He asked, simple, open. And that openness gave her room to continue without hesitation. She let out a slow breath, her eyes drifting for a moment before returning to him. Everything you have been holding back starts to show up, she said, and there was no distance in her words now, no layer between what she felt and what she allowed herself to say. Daniel did not interrupt, did not shift, he just listened, and that steadiness became something she leaned into without realizing it. It is easier when there is noise, she continued, her voice quieter now, more inward. Meetings, decisions, expectations, all of it gives you somewhere to put your attention. She paused, her fingers resting lightly against the counter, no longer fidgeting, just still. But when that goes away, she added, her gaze lowering slightly, you are left with everything you did not deal with. The words settled between them, not heavy, not overwhelming, just real. Daniel nodded once, slow, understanding, not because he knew her story, but because he recognized the truth in what she was saying, and that was enough. Charlotte let out a faint breath that almost trembled but did not quite reach that point. Her composure still intact, just softer now, more human. I have spent years making sure there is always something to do, she said. And this time there was no hesitation, no second guessing, just honesty. Because stopping means noticing. She looked back up at him, her expression steady but open. And noticing is inconvenient. Daniel's mouth curved slightly. Not quite a smile, just an acknowledgement of something understood. Inconvenient things are usually the ones that matter, he said quietly, and that landed somewhere deeper than she expected. Not as advice, not as correction, just a simple truth placed gently into the space between them. Charlotte absorbed it, her breath slowing, her shoulders fully relaxed now. The tension she carried earlier completely gone, replaced by something else, something quieter, something more grounded. She looked around briefly, the lounge still moving as it always had, people talking, walking, negotiating their own moments. But it felt distant now, like a background she was no longer part of. And when her gaze returned to Daniel, there was a clarity in it that had not been there before. "I do not usually say things like this," she admitted, not apologizing, just stating it as it was. Daniel nodded once, as if that made sense, as if it did not require explanation, and that response, or lack of one, allowed her to continue without feeling exposed. "I do not usually have the space to," she added, and the words felt complete, not because they explained everything, but because they did not need to. Daniel rested his hand lightly on the counter again, the same steady presence he had maintained from the beginning. "You do right now," he said simply, and that was it. No emphasis, no push, just a statement. And somehow, that made all the difference. Charlotte did not respond immediately. She just stood there, letting the words settle, letting the moment exist, without rushing past it. And for the first time in a long time, she did not feel like she needed to move forward. She did not feel like she needed to control what came next. She just stayed, because for once, staying did not feel like falling behind. It felt like finally catching up to something she had been missing. Charlotte did not check the time, and that alone felt unfamiliar, almost disorienting, because her life had always moved in measured increments. 15 minutes here, 30 minutes there, every second accounted for, optimized, justified. But now the clock existed somewhere behind her, irrelevant, fading into the background like the rest of the noise she had spent years managing. She shifted slightly, not to leave, not to reposition, just to remain comfortable in a space she had not expected to occupy this long, her gaze drifting briefly toward the wide glass windows where planes moved slowly across the horizon, lifting into a sky that did not ask anything from them, just giving them room to rise. And for a moment she wondered what it would feel like to move like that, without pressure, without expectation attached to every direction. She looked back at Daniel, still there, still steady, as if nothing about this moment required adjustment, and that steadiness had become something she trusted without realizing it. "Do you ever think about it?" she asked quietly, her voice carrying less weight now, not because it mattered less, but because she was no longer holding it so tightly. Daniel glanced up, his expression unchanged, open in a way that did not invite anything but did not block it either. "About what?" he asked. Charlotte paused, her eyes lowering for a second as she searched for the shape of the thought. "What people carry around," she said, her tone thoughtful, less guarded than before. "All the things they do not say, the things that sit just beneath everything else." Daniel considered that for a moment, his hand resting lightly against the counter as it had been before. "I think people carry what they do not feel safe putting down," he said, simple, direct, and the words settled into her immediately, not as something new, but as something she had been avoiding naming. Charlotte nodded slowly, her fingers tracing the edge of the counter without urgency. "And what makes it safe?" she asked, not looking at him this time, her gaze fixed somewhere, just beyond, as if the answer might exist there. Daniel did not respond right away, and the silence that followed did not feel like hesitation. It felt intentional, like he was allowing the question to exist before answering it. "No pressure to explain," he said finally. "No need to be understood right away." Charlotte's lips parted slightly, not in surprise, but in recognition, because that was exactly what this felt like, not being analyzed, not being interpreted, just being allowed to exist, without immediate meaning attached to it. She let out a slow breath, her shoulders lowering even more, the last traces of tension leaving her posture completely. "That does not happen where I come from," she said softly, not with bitterness, just clarity. Daniel nodded once. "It can," he said, and that was it. No elaboration, no attempt to convince her, just the possibility placed gently into the space between them. Charlotte looked at him then, really looked, not at his role, not at his position in the room, but at the way he held himself, the quiet certainty in his presence. And for the first time she considered something she had never allowed before, that maybe it was not the world that made space rare, maybe it was the way she had learned to move through it, always filling, always directing, always anticipating. She felt a small shift in her chest, something settling into place rather than breaking apart. "Maybe I forgot how to leave space," she said, more to herself than to him. And the words did not feel heavy. They felt honest. Daniel gave a small nod, acknowledging without reaching. "It comes back," he he said quietly, and there was no promise in it, no guarantee, just a calm certainty that did not need to prove itself. Charlotte let the words sit, not rushing to respond, not needing to turn them into something actionable. She simply stood there, present in a way she had not been in a long time. Her phone still untouched, the world still waiting somewhere, beyond the glass and the polished floors. But for now, for this moment, she did not feel pulled by it. She felt grounded where she was, in a conversation that asked nothing from her and gave something she had not realized she needed. And when she finally moved, it was not away, not yet, just a small shift of her stance, a quiet acknowledgement that she was still here, because for once, she had found a place where she did not have to be anything other than present. Charlotte finally reached for her phone, not out of urgency, not out of habit, but because something inside her told her it was time to move again. The screen lit up instantly, a cascade of missed calls, messages stacked on top of each other, reminders she would normally have responded to without hesitation, and for a moment she just looked at it, not overwhelmed, not rushed, just aware of how quickly that world would close back around her the second she stepped into it. She turned the phone over again, not to ignore it this time, but to finish what this moment had quietly become, her gaze lifting back to Daniel, who had already returned to his steady rhythm, as if nothing about the past several minutes required acknowledgement, and maybe it did not. Maybe that was the point. Charlotte straightened slightly, not returning to the rigid posture she had arrived with, but something more balanced, something that belonged to her rather than the room. "I should go," she said, her voice calm, without the usual edge of obligation. Daniel nodded once. No hesitation, no attempt to hold her there, just a simple recognition of what was already true. "Yeah," he said quietly, and that was enough. Charlotte lingered for a second, not because she needed to say more, but because she was noticing something she had not expected, the absence of the usual exchange. No business card, no name offered, no attempt to extend the connection beyond this space. And for a brief moment, she considered it, the instinct to formalize, to define, to make this something she could return to in a structured way. But just as quickly, she let that instinct pass, because this had never been about holding on. It had been about letting something exist without needing to own it. She picked up her cup, then set it back down again, realizing she did not need it. A small, almost quiet smile touching her expression, not visible enough for anyone else to notice, but real enough that she felt it. "Thank you," she said, the words simple, but carrying more weight than they usually did. Daniel gave a slight nod, not brushing it off, not expanding it, just accepting it as it was. "You are welcome," he replied, his tone steady, unchanged, and that steadiness followed her as she turned, her heels meeting the polished floor again, the rhythm of the room re-entering her awareness step by step. Voices, movement, expectation, all of it waiting exactly where she had left it. But something was different now, not in the room, not in the people, but in the way she moved through it. She did not reach for her phone immediately, did not rush to respond. She simply walked, her pace unhurried, her shoulders relaxed, as if the weight she had been carrying had shifted just enough to remind her it did not have to stay where it was. Near the exit, she paused briefly, not turning back, not needing to, just standing there for a second as the light from the runway filtered through the glass, planes moving in the distance, steady, unforced, and a thought surfaced quietly, not loud, not demanding, just clear. She had spent years surrounded by people who wanted her answers, her decisions, her attention, but very few had ever given her space, real space, the kind that did not ask for anything in return, and it had taken someone who offered nothing but that to show her what she had been missing. She stepped forward again, merging back into the flow of the world that knew her name, her title, her value, but not this moment. And as she moved, something stayed with her, not a memory she needed to hold on to, not a lesson she needed to repeat, just a quiet shift in how she understood presence, because he had not tried to understand her, he had not asked her to explain herself, he had not reached for anything beyond what was there, and somehow, in doing nothing